Salvatore Marchetti watched in horror as his 8-year-old son Tommy pointed directly at their black housekeeper and declared, "I want Amara to be my new mama." The silence that followed would shatter everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and the dangerous world he commanded from the shadows of Chicago. Tell us your city below and subscribe. Ready for an amazing story? Let's begin. But to understand how the most feared crime boss in the city found himself taking orders from a child, we need to go back 3 weeks earlier to the morning when everything began to change. The crystal decanter shattered against the marble wall of Salvatore Marchetti's study, sending droplets of 25-year-old whiskey across priceless artwork. His dark eyes blazed with controlled fury as he faced the 3 men who had just delivered news that would reshape his empire. Dead? His voice was deadly quiet, the kind of tone that made seasoned killers nervous. All 3 of them? Vincent Torino, his most trusted captain, nodded grimly. The Romano family hit our warehouse operation at midnight. Marco, Tony, and little Joe didn't make it out. Salvatore's jaw clenched. At 42, he had built the Marchetti organization into Chicago's most powerful crime family through careful planning and ruthless execution. His black hair, now touched with distinguished silver at the temples, and his perfectly tailored Italian suits, commanded respect in every room he entered. But beneath the polished exterior burned the soul of a man who had learned early that weakness meant death. "And my son?" Salvatore's voice carried a protective edge that his men rarely heard. "Tommy's safe, boss," Carlos assured him quickly. "Still sleeping upstairs. The hit was professional, but they didn't come near the estate." The estate, Salvatore's fortress in Lincoln Park, purchased legitimately through his various business fronts, served as both home and headquarters. 15 rooms, bulletproof windows, and enough security to protect a head of state. Everything designed to keep his most precious possession safe, his 8-year-old son, Tommy. 2 years had passed since cancer claimed his wife Sophia, leaving Salvatore to raise Tommy alone. The boy was his world, the one pure thing in a life built on shadows and calculated violence. Every decision Salvatore made, every territory he claimed, every enemy he eliminated, was done with one goal: securing Tommy's future. "Sir?" A soft voice interrupted his thoughts. "I'm sorry, but Tommy's asking for you." Salvatore turned to see the woman who had become an unexpected constant in their lives over the past month. Amara Williams stood in the doorway, her professional demeanor intact despite the late hour. At 28, she moved through their household with quiet efficiency, her warm brown eyes missing nothing, while her presence somehow brought peace to the chaos of his world. Unlike the parade of previous housekeepers who had quit after discovering the true nature of his business, Amara seemed unruffled by the armed guards, the midnight meetings, or the atmosphere of controlled danger that surrounded the Marchetti estate. She simply did her job with a grace that reminded Salvatore that normal life still existed somewhere beyond his reach. "He heard the noise," she explained. Her voice calm but concerned. "He's worried something happened to you." The fact that Tommy was awake and asking for him sent a spike of protective fury through Salvatore's chest. His son should never have to worry about losing his father the way he had lost his mother. "Tell him I'll be right up," Salvatore said, his voice gentling automatically at the mention of his son. As Amara nodded and disappeared back into the house, Vincent leaned forward. "Boss, we need to respond to Romano tonight. Every hour we wait makes us look weak." Salvatore's expression hardened again as he returned his attention to business. The Romano family had just declared war by hitting his operation and killing his men. In their world, such aggression demanded swift and overwhelming retaliation. But upstairs, his 8-year-old son needed to know his father was safe. "Double security around the estate," he ordered. "I want eyes on every approach. Carlos, reach out to our contacts in Romano territory. I want to know where Francesco Romano sleeps tonight." "And then?" Vincent asked, though they all knew the answer. Salvatore's smile held no warmth. "Then we remind the Romano family why nobody touches what belongs to Sal Marchetti." As his men dispersed to carry out their orders, Salvatore climbed the grand staircase toward his son's room. The weight of his responsibilities pressed down on him with each step. In his world, showing weakness invited destruction. But in Tommy's world, his father was just the man who read bedtime stories and promised that everything would be okay. The challenge was making sure both worlds never collided in a way that would destroy the person he loved most. When he reached Tommy's door, Salvatore could hear Amara's gentle voice inside, reading from what sounded like an adventure story. For a moment he paused, struck by how natural she sounded, how completely she had integrated into their lives, without ever asking questions about the nature of his business. That should have worried him more than it did. The next morning brought unseasonable warmth to Chicago, though the atmosphere inside the Marchetti estate remained frigid with tension. Salvatore sat at the head of his dining table, scanning intelligence reports, while Tommy attacked a stack of pancakes with the focused determination only 8-year-old could muster. "Dad, how come Amara makes better pancakes than Mrs. Henderson did?" Tommy asked between bites, syrup coating his chin. Salvatore glanced up from a surveillance photo of Francesco Romano's mansion. Mrs. Henderson had been Tommy's previous nanny, a stern British woman who had lasted exactly 3 days after witnessing Salvatore's men dispose of a problem in the estate's garage. "Maybe because she actually cares about how they taste," Salvatore replied, watching as Amara moved efficiently around the kitchen, preparing his usual breakfast of black coffee and fresh fruit. Unlike Mrs. Henderson, who had treated her position as merely a job, Amara seemed to genuinely enjoy Tommy's company. She listened when he talked about his day at school, helped with his homework without making him feel stupid, and somehow always knew exactly what he needed, whether it was encouragement, discipline, or just someone to sit quietly beside him when he missed his mother. "Mr. Marchetti?" Amara approached the table with his coffee, her movements graceful despite the obvious weight of whatever was on her mind. "Could I speak with you privately when you have a moment?" Salvatore studied her face, noting the slight tension around her eyes. In the month she had worked for them, she had never asked for private conversations. She simply did her job with remarkable competence and stayed out of his business affairs. "Tommy, go get ready for school," he said. "Vincent will drive you today." His son's face immediately fell. "But you always drive me on Thursdays." The disappointment in Tommy's voice hit Salvatore harder than he cared to admit. Since Sophia's death, he had maintained certain routines with his son, sacred traditions that helped them both feel like they were still a family. Driving Tommy to school on Thursdays was one of those rituals. But today, with the Romano family's declaration of war hanging over them, Salvatore couldn't risk exposing his son to potential danger. If Francesco Romano was desperate enough to start a fight, he might be desperate enough to target innocents. "Just today, buddy," Salvatore promised. "Tomorrow we'll get ice cream after school to make up for it." Tommy brightened considerably. "Can Amara come with us?" The question hung in the air, unexpected and loaded with implications. Salvatore found his gaze shifting to Amara, who had gone still beside the table. In Tommy's simple request, he heard the echo of a deeper need, the desire for the kind of family dynamic that had been missing from their lives since Sophia's death. "We'll see," Salvatore said carefully. After Tommy reluctantly headed upstairs to prepare for school, Salvatore gestured for Amara to take a seat across from him. This close, he could see the intelligence behind her calm exterior, the way she observed details without appearing to stare, the strength that allowed her to maintain composure in a household most people would find terrifying. "What's on your mind?" he asked. Amara folded her hands in her lap, her posture professional but not subservient. "I need to know how much danger Tommy is in." The directness of her question caught Salvatore off guard. Most people in his orbit either pretended his business didn't exist or asked carefully coded questions. Amara had just asked for the truth with unflinching honesty. "Why do you ask?" he countered, though he already knew the answer. "Because I care about him," she said simply, "and because I've worked in enough households to recognize when security measures change overnight. The new guards, the altered routines, the fact that you're suddenly too dangerous to drive your own son to school. Something's happened." Salvatore leaned back in his chair, reassessing the woman across from him. She was observant, direct, and clearly more intelligent than her employment application had indicated. In his world, such perception could be either an asset or a liability. "Tommy is safe," he said finally. "The estate is secure and Vincent knows how to handle school transport without incident." "That's not what I asked." Amara met his gaze steadily. "I asked how much danger he's in." The challenge in her voice sent an unexpected thrill through Salvatore's chest. When was the last time anyone had pressed him for answers he didn't want to give? When had someone shown enough backbone to demand honesty from a man most people feared to displease? "Some," he admitted, "but manageable." Amara nodded slowly, as if filing away information for future reference. "Then I want to increase my hours. If Tommy's going to need more supervision and security, he should have someone familiar with him, someone he trusts. That's not necessary. Mr. Marchetti, she interrupted, the first time she had ever cut him off mid-sentence. With respect, you hired me to take care of your son. That means more than just cooking meals and helping with homework. It means being here when he's scared, confused, or feeling like his world is falling apart. She leaned forward slightly, her voice gaining intensity. I don't know what kind of business you're in, and I'm not asking, but I can see that Tommy is the most important thing in your life. If something happens to you, if this danger you're managing becomes unmanageable, he's going to need someone he trusts to help him through it. The sincerity in her voice hit Salvatore like a physical blow. She wasn't asking for more money or seeking to leverage Tommy's affection for personal gain. She was offering to put herself deeper into a situation she clearly understood could become dangerous, simply because she cared about his son. Amara, he began, then stopped. How could he explain that the danger she was volunteering to face came from men who viewed collateral damage as acceptable casualties? How could he tell her that his enemies had killed wives and children before, and that caring about Tommy could put a target on her back? Before he could find the words, Vincent appeared in the doorway. Boss, we need to move. Romano's people are asking questions at Tommy's school. The blood in Salvatore's veins turned to ice. They had found his son's school. The one place he had hoped would remain neutral territory had been compromised by his enemies. His gaze snapped to Amara, who had gone pale but hadn't moved from her seat. She had just learned exactly what kind of danger surrounded the boy she had volunteered to protect. And somehow she still wasn't running. The private school Tommy attended sat nestled in Chicago's Gold Coast, its Georgian architecture and manicured grounds designed to project old money respectability. Salvatore had chosen it specifically because it catered to wealthy families who valued discretion above all else. The kind of place where powerful men enrolled their children and expected privacy in return. Now, watching through his bulletproof Mercedes as Vincent's team swept the perimeter, Salvatore realized that privacy had become a liability. 2 Romano soldiers questioned the principal about Tommy's schedule, Vincent reported through his earpiece. They claimed to be from Child Protective Services, but the documentation was fake. Salvatore's grip tightened on his phone. How long ago? 20 minutes. They're gone now. But the message was clear. In the seat beside him, Amara sat perfectly still, absorbing every word of the conversation. When Salvatore had insisted she accompany them for Tommy's protection, she hadn't hesitated. Now, faced with the reality of men targeting an 8-year-old boy, her composure impressed him more than her courage. Mr. Marchetti, she said quietly, Tommy's going to sense that something's wrong the moment we walk in there. Children are more perceptive than adults give them credit for. She was right. His son had inherited Sophia's ability to read emotional undercurrents, a trait that made him both sensitive and remarkably intuitive. The last thing Salvatore wanted was for Tommy to spend his day at school worried about his father's safety. What do you suggest? He asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Let me go in alone, Amara proposed. Tell him I'm here to take him to a special lunch with his father, something positive to look forward to instead of security concerns to worry about. The idea of letting her enter the school without protection went against every instinct Salvatore had developed over 2 decades in organized crime. But the logic was sound. A black woman in professional attire would draw far less attention than a convoy of armed men retrieving a crime boss's son. Vincent? Salvatore spoke into his earpiece. I don't like it, boss, but she's right. Less conspicuous. Salvatore studied Amara's profile as she watched the school entrance. You understand that if Romano's men are still in the area, approaching Tommy makes you a target too. I understand. Her voice held steady conviction. But Tommy doesn't deserve to be afraid because of choices he didn't make. The phrase hit Salvatore with unexpected force. Choices he didn't make. How many times had he justified his own actions by claiming they were necessary for Tommy's protection? How many times had he convinced himself that expanding his empire, eliminating threats, building his reputation through fear and violence was all for his son's benefit? But the truth was more complicated. Some of his choices had been necessary, others had been about power, control, and the momentum of a life built on conflict. And now, those choices were putting an innocent child at risk. Go, he decided, but you wear this. He handed her a small device that looked like an expensive earring. Panic button. One press brings Vincent and his team running. Amara accepted the device without question, securing it to her ear with practiced efficiency. What should I tell Tommy about the lunch? Tell him we're celebrating. Salvatore's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. Tell him his father realized he's been working too much and wants to spend the afternoon with the two most important people in his life. Something shifted in Amara's expression at his words, a warmth that transformed her professional competence into something more personal. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, and Salvatore found himself wondering when he had started thinking of her as one of the two most important people in his life. The realization should have alarmed him. Instead, it felt like coming home. "I'll bring him out through the main entrance," Amara said, reaching for the door handle. "If anything feels wrong, I'll take him to the administration office and wait for you there." As Salvatore watched her walk toward the school with confident strides, he realized that Amara Williams had become far more than just Tommy's caregiver. She had become someone he trusted, with the thing he valued most in the world. In his business, such trust was often misplaced, but something about the way she had volunteered to increase her hours, the way she understood Tommy's needs without being told, the way she faced danger to protect a child she had known for only a month, told him that his instincts about her were sound. 20 minutes later, Amara emerged from the school with Tommy practically bouncing beside her, his backpack slung over one shoulder and excitement radiating from every step. Whatever she had told him had transformed what could have been a frightening interruption into an adventure. "Dad!" Tommy called out as he spotted the Mercedes. "Amara says we're having a celebration lunch and that you picked somewhere special." As his son climbed into the back seat with Amara following, Salvatore caught her eye in the rearview mirror. She had kept her promise to turn potential fear into excitement, protecting Tommy's emotional well-being, even as she helped extract him from physical danger. "Where are we going?" Tommy asked eagerly. Salvatore hadn't actually planned a destination, but looking at his son's face in the mirror, he made a decision that surprised himself. "Navy Pier," he said. "We're going to ride the Ferris wheel and eat too much junk food and pretend we're tourists for the afternoon." Tommy's delighted laugh filled the car as Vincent's security team fell into protective formation around them. For the first time in months, Salvatore allowed himself to imagine what it would feel like to be just a father, spending time with his son and the woman who was beginning to feel like family. But in the distance, Francesco Romano was planning his next move, and Salvatore knew that peaceful moments like this one were about to become much more precious and much more dangerous. Navy Pier bustled with late autumn tourists, families capturing memories against the backdrop of Lake Michigan's steel-gray waters. Salvatore moved through the crowd with practiced awareness, noting exit routes and potential threats, while maintaining the appearance of a relaxed father enjoying an afternoon with his family. Family. The word had been circling his thoughts since watching Amara coax excited laughter from Tommy during their Ferris wheel ride. She moved through their day with natural ease, splitting her attention between keeping Tommy entertained and remaining alert to their surroundings without making either concern obvious. "Dad, look!" Tommy pointed toward a street performer juggling fire torches near the pier's edge. "Can we watch?" Before Salvatore could respond, Amara was already guiding Tommy toward the performance, positioning herself between the boy and the crowd while keeping sightlines clear for Vincent's security team. The tactical thinking behind her movement was subtle but deliberate, the choices of someone who understood protective protocols without formal training. "She's good," Vincent murmured, appearing at Salvatore's shoulder with 2 cups of coffee. "Natural instincts for this kind of work." Salvatore accepted the coffee, keeping his gaze fixed on Amara as she laughed at something Tommy whispered in her ear. "Too good, maybe." "Sir, women don't usually adapt this quickly to our world," Salvatore explained. "They either run immediately, or they stick around for the wrong reasons. Money, excitement, proximity to power." Vincent followed his boss's gaze. "What reasons do you think she has?" It was a fair question. In the month Amara had worked for them, she had never asked about his business, never seemed impressed by his wealth or intimidated by his reputation. She treated him with professional courtesy, nothing more. Her focus remained consistently centered on Tommy's well-being, which was exactly what made her so dangerous to his peace of mind. "Tommy!" a familiar voice called from behind them. Salvatore turned to see Jennifer Romano approaching with her 10-year-old daughter, Sophia. Jennifer was Francesco Romano's sister-in-law, married to his younger brother, Michael. Under normal circumstances, she and Salvatore maintained polite social relations at charity functions and school events, their family rivalry kept carefully separate from civilian interactions. Today was not normal circumstances. "Jennifer," Salvatore acknowledged carefully, automatically positioning himself between her and Tommy. "Such a beautiful afternoon for family outings," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I haven't seen you at school events lately. I hope everything's all right." The question sounded innocent enough, but Salvatore caught the subtle probe for information about changes in his routine. Jennifer Romano might play the part of a harmless socialite, but she came from the same world he did. She understood the significance of altered patterns and increased security measures. "Just busy with work," he replied noncommittally. Amara appeared beside them with Tommy in tow, her expression pleasant but her posture subtly protective. "Mr. Marchetti, Tommy's asking about the boat tour." "Of course." Jennifer's gaze sharpened as she took in Amara's presence. "And you are?" "Amara Williams," she replied with professional courtesy. "I help with Tommy's care." "How lovely." Jennifer's tone held the particular brand of condescension wealthy white women often directed at black service workers. It must be so rewarding to work with such a special little boy. Tommy, oblivious to the adult tensions, tugged on Amara's hand. "Can we go see the boats now? You promised we could walk to the end of the pier." Amara glanced at Salvatore, who nodded almost imperceptibly. She understood the signal, removed Tommy from the situation while appearing to simply follow his wishes. "Come on, sweetheart," she said, already steering him away from the conversation. "Let's go look at the harbor." As they walked toward the pier's end, Salvatore noted how Jennifer's eyes followed their movement with calculating interest. "She's quite devoted," Jennifer observed. "How long has she been with your family?" "Recent addition." Salvatore kept his answer brief. Jennifer watched Amara kneel beside Tommy to point out different types of boats in the marina. "It's so hard to find good help these days. People who truly understand their place in a household." The comment was designed to probe, to see if Amara was simply an employee or something more significant. In Jennifer's world, the distinction mattered. Servants could be ignored or eliminated without consequence. Family members required more careful handling. "Jennifer," Salvatore said quietly, his tone carrying warning, "whatever message your family wants to send, it doesn't involve innocent people." Her mask of social politeness slipped slightly. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Salvatore." "Then let me be clear." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to the level that made grown men nervous. "Tommy is off limits. Anyone who works in my household is off limits. If Francesco wants to settle our business dispute, he can reach out through appropriate channels." Jennifer's smile returned, but it held edge now. "Of course, I would never suggest otherwise. Though you know how unpredictable these situations can become when emotions run high." The threat was delicate, but unmistakable. Francesco Romano was preparing to escalate their conflict, and he wanted Salvatore to know that the rules of engagement were changing. "Dad!" Tommy's voice carried across the pier as he ran back toward them, Amara following at a measured pace. "The boat tour leaves in 10 minutes. Can we go, please?" Looking at his son's excited face, then at Jennifer Romano's predatory smile, Salvatore made a decision that would reshape everything that followed. "Actually," he said loud enough for Vincent's team to hear, "we're going home. I just remembered I have important business to take care of." Tommy's face fell, but he nodded without complaint. At 8 years old, he already understood that sometimes his father's work took precedence over planned activities. As they walked away, Salvatore caught Jennifer's satisfied expression. She had accomplished her goal, disrupting their peaceful afternoon and sending a message that nowhere was truly safe. But she had also given him information. Francesco Romano was watching his movements, tracking his routines, looking for vulnerabilities. The fact that Jennifer had appeared at Navy Pier suggested they had been under surveillance from the moment they left the school, which meant that every moment of their family outing, every laugh Tommy had shared with Amara, every protective gesture she had made, had been observed and catalogued by his enemies. The war between the families was no longer theoretical. It had become personal, and Amara Williams, whether she realized it or not, was now a target. The emergency meeting convened in Salvatore's study at sunset, the golden light streaming through bulletproof windows, casting long shadows across faces lined with concern. Vincent had called in the family's senior leadership, 5 men who had stood beside Salvatore through territorial disputes, federal investigations, and 2 decades of building an empire. But tonight they weren't discussing business expansion or rival families. Tonight, they were planning how to protect an 8-year-old boy and the woman who had somehow become essential to his happiness. Romano surveillance confirms they've been tracking your movements for at least a week, Vincent reported, spreading photographs across Salvatore's desk. Pictures of Tommy at school, Amara at the grocery store, you at 3 different business locations. Marco Stellini, Salvatore's consigliere, leaned forward to examine the images. At 65, Marco had survived longer than most men in their line of work by understanding the difference between necessary risks and foolish exposure. They're building profiles, learning patterns. This isn't random intimidation, it's preparation for targeted action. Salvatore studied a photograph of Amara helping Tommy out of the car at school, noting how naturally protective her posture appeared even in candid surveillance shots. She had been guarding his son without conscious thought, her instincts already aligned with his family's security needs. What kind of targeted action? He asked, though he suspected the answer. Kidnapping, Tony Castellano replied bluntly. Tony handled the family's more direct problem-solving, and his assessment carried weight precisely because he understood the mechanics of such operations. Take the boy, demand territory concessions, or take the woman, force you into emotional decisions that compromise strategic thinking. The casual way Tony discussed threats against Tommy and Amara sent cold fury coursing through Salvatore's veins. These were the calculations of their world, human lives reduced to tactical advantages and negotiating positions. Francesco Romano has made a critical miscalculation, Salvatore said, his voice deadly quiet. He's assumed that threatening my family will make me weaker. In reality, it's about to make me extremely motivated to end this conflict permanently. Boss? Vincent interjected carefully. Maybe we should consider alternative approaches. Moving Tommy to the safe house in Wisconsin, increasing Amara's security detail, negotiating territorial boundaries. No. Salvatore's interruption cut through the suggestion like a blade. I will not live like a prisoner in my own city, and I will not ask my son to grow up in hiding. Francesco Romano wants a war. He's going to get one. The men around the table exchanged glances. They had seen Salvatore angry before, but this was different. This was the cold, calculating fury of a man whose most fundamental boundaries had been crossed. What are your orders? Marco asked. Before Salvatore could respond, a soft knock interrupted the meeting. Maria, their longtime housekeeper, appeared in the doorway with uncharacteristic nervousness. Mr. Marchetti, I'm sorry to disturb you, but Tommy is asking for you. He seems upset about something. Salvatore's protective instincts immediately overrode strategic planning. What's wrong? He won't say. Just keeps asking if you and Miss Williams are okay. The mention of Amara in the same breath as his own safety struck Salvatore with sudden understanding. Tommy had begun thinking of them as a unit. His father and the woman who cared for him were now equally important to his sense of security. Where is Amara? Vincent asked. Upstairs with Tommy, Maria replied. She's been trying to calm him down for the past 20 minutes. Salvatore stood immediately. Gentlemen, we'll continue this in an hour. Marco, start reaching out to our allies. I want Francesco Romano to understand that threatening my family has consequences beyond his imagination. As he climbed the stairs toward Tommy's room, Salvatore could hear his son's voice through the partially open door, high-pitched with anxiety. But what if something happens to Dad like what happened to Mama? What if the bad people hurt Amara because she takes care of me? Salvatore froze on the landing. Tommy knew. Somehow his 8-year-old son had picked up on the danger surrounding them and had correctly identified Amara as a potential target. Hey, sweetheart. Amara's voice was gentle but strong. Your dad is very good at protecting the people he loves, and I'm not going anywhere, okay? Sometimes adults have difficult situations to handle, but that doesn't mean anything bad is going to happen to your family. Family, she had called them family. Promise? Tommy's voice was small, vulnerable. I promise I'm going to keep taking care of you, Amara replied, and your dad promises the same thing. We're both here, and we're both safe. Salvatore stepped into the doorway, taking in the scene before him. Tommy sat curled against Amara on his bed, his dark hair messy from worry, while she smoothed it back with unconscious maternal tenderness. The sight hit him with the force of recognition. This was what he had been missing since Sophia's death. Not just someone to care for Tommy, but someone who loved his son with genuine devotion. Dad! Tommy scrambled off the bed and ran to him. Amara says you're not in any danger, but I heard Vincent talking on the phone about bad people. Salvatore knelt to his son's eye level, aware that his next words would shape Tommy's sense of security for years to come. Tommy, there are some people who aren't happy with some business decisions I've made. But that doesn't mean you or Amara are in danger. Do you know why? Tommy shook his head. Because protecting you is the most important job I have, Salvatore said simply. More important than any business, any money, anything else in the world. And Amara is part of our family now, which means protecting her is just as important. Over Tommy's head, Salvatore met Amara's eyes. She had gone very still at his words, understanding their significance. He wasn't just reassuring his son, he was making a declaration that would change everything about their relationship. So Amara can stay with us forever? Tommy asked hopefully. The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Salvatore found himself looking at Amara's face, searching for any sign of fear or uncertainty. Instead, he saw something that looked remarkably like hope. That, he said carefully, depends on whether Amara wants to stay with us forever. For a long moment no one spoke. No one. Then Amara smiled, the first genuinely unguarded expression he had seen from her since the day she started working for them. I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather be, she said simply. Tommy cheered and launched himself back into Amara's arms, chattering excitedly about all the things they could do together. But Salvatore remained focused on the woman who had just committed herself to a life she didn't fully understand, in a world that could destroy everything she held dear. The realization that he was falling in love with her should have terrified him. Instead, it made him absolutely certain that Francesco Romano had picked the wrong family to threaten. Now the attack came at dawn, 3 days after Salvatore's declaration in Tommy's bedroom. Amara woke to the sound of shattering glass and Vincent's urgent voice shouting orders through the estate's intercom system. Years of working in unpredictable households had taught her to react quickly to crisis, but nothing had prepared her for the controlled chaos of a coordinated assault on a crime boss's fortress. "Stay down," Vincent's voice crackled through the speakers. "All civilians to safe rooms immediately." Amara rolled out of bed and ran toward Tommy's room, finding him already awake and surprisingly calm for an 8-year-old experiencing his first family war. He sat on his bed fully dressed, small hands gripping a backpack that contained emergency supplies Salvatore had insisted he keep ready. "Amara!" Tommy reached for her as she entered. "Dad said if anything like this happened, we should go to the special room and wait for him." The special room, Salvatore had shown it to her 2 days earlier, a reinforced safe room disguised as a walk-in closet in the master bedroom, bulletproof walls, independent communication systems, and enough supplies to last 72 hours if necessary. "That's right, sweetheart," Amara said, scooping him into her arms despite his protests that he could walk. "Let's go find your dad." They made it halfway down the hall before another explosion rocked the house, this one closer and more powerful. Emergency lighting flickered on as the main power grid suffered damage, casting eerie red shadows across familiar walls. "Amara! Tommy?" Salvatore's voice carried from the direction of the safe room, tight with controlled panic. "Here," she called back, quickening her pace. He appeared in the hallway dressed in tactical clothing she had never seen before, a bulletproof vest over black cargo pants and boots, designed for combat rather than boardrooms. The transformation was startling. This wasn't the polished businessman or devoted father she knew. This was the dangerous man whose reputation kept rival families awake at night. "Thank God," he breathed, reaching them in 3 quick strides. His hands moved over both of them, checking for injuries with practiced efficiency. "Are you hurt? Either of you?" "We're fine," Amara assured him, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. "Tommy was ready like you taught him." Pride flickered across Salvatore's face as he looked at his son. "Good boy. Now listen carefully. You and Amara are going into the safe room. Vincent's team will hold the perimeter while I handle Romano's people." "Dad, no!" Tommy's composure finally cracked. "Don't leave us. What if something happens to you?" The naked fear in his son's voice stopped Salvatore cold. Amara watched conflict play across his features as he struggled between the need to protect his family and the requirement to lead his men against this attack. "Tommy," she said quietly, "your dad has to go make sure we're all safe. But he's going to come back, okay? He promises." Salvatore's eyes met hers over Tommy's head, gratitude and something deeper flickering in their dark depths. "Amara's right. I promise I'm coming back. but I need to know you're both somewhere safe so I can focus on ending this." Another round of gunfire echoed through the estate. Closer this time, Vincent's voice crackled through Salvatore's earpiece. "Boss, we need you in the command center. They've breached the south wall." "Go," Amara told him, understanding the impossible position he was in. "We'll be safe. Handle your business." For a moment, Salvatore looked like he wanted to say something more. Instead, he kissed Tommy's forehead and squeezed Amara's shoulder, a touch that lingered just long enough to convey everything words couldn't express in the middle of a crisis. "Safe room, now," he ordered, already moving toward the stairs. "Don't come out until I give the all-clear personally." As Amara secured the heavy door behind them, Tommy settled into a corner of the safe room with his backpack, pulling out a handheld gaming device, with the matter-of-fact acceptance of a child who had been preparing for this scenario his entire young life. "Is this what it was like when your mama died?" he asked suddenly, not looking up from his game. The question hit Amara like a physical blow. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "The danger, the fighting. Dad gets really scared when bad things might happen to people he loves. He was scared like this when Mama got sick, even though he tried to hide it." Through the safe room's monitor system, Amara could see Salvatore coordinating his men's response with military precision, directing defensive positions and planning counterstrikes. But Tommy was right. Beneath the tactical competence, she could see the same bone-deep terror she had witnessed during their conversation about his wife's death. "Your dad loves you very much," she said carefully. "Sometimes that love makes the danger feel scarier because he has so much to lose." Tommy finally looked up at her, his dark eyes far too knowing for his age. "He loves you too, you know. That's why he's extra scared now." The simple statement hung between them as gunfire continued to echo through the estate. Amara found herself thinking about the moment 3 days ago when Salvatore had declared her part of their family, the way his voice had changed when he promised to protect her with the same devotion he showed Tommy. "How do you know that?" she asked. Tommy shrugged with 8-year-old wisdom. "He looks at you the same way he used to look at Mama, and he smiles different when you're around. Plus, he told Vincent that you're not just an employee anymore." Before Amara could process the implications of that revelation, the intercom crackled to life with Salvatore's voice. "All clear. Romano's men are neutralized. Amara, Tommy, you can come out now." They emerged from the safe room to find the estate's main floor, littered with broken glass and bullet holes, but surprisingly intact. Vincent met them in the hallway, his tactical gear streaked with what looked like soot, and his expression grim with satisfaction. "How bad?" Amara asked. "Could have been worse," Vincent replied. 6 of Romano's men, all accounted for. They thought they could intimidate the boss by hitting his home. They learned otherwise. "Where is he?" she pressed. Vincent's expression softened slightly. "Command center, dealing with cleanup. He wants to see you both, but he's processing what almost happened." Amara understood. Salvatore had just faced his greatest fear, the possibility of losing the people he loved to the violence that defined his world. The successful defense of his home was less important than the realization of how close he had come to losing everything that mattered. When they found him in his study, he was standing at the window overlooking the estate's damaged south wall, still wearing his tactical gear but moving like a man carrying invisible weight. "Dad?" Tommy approached cautiously. Salvatore turned, and the relief that transformed his face was devastating to witness. He dropped to one knee, gathering his son into his arms with desperate tenderness. "I'm sorry," he whispered into Tommy's hair. "I'm sorry you had to go through that. I'm sorry my choices put you in danger." Over Tommy's shoulder, his eyes found Amara's. In them she saw the same apology, the same desperate need for forgiveness, but she also saw something else, the absolute certainty that he would burn the entire city down before he let anyone threaten his family again. The war with Francesco Romano had just become personal in ways that would reshape everything about their lives. 2 weeks after the attack, Amara discovered that loving a crime boss meant learning to live with constant, carefully managed terror. Not fear for her own safety. Salvatore's security measures ensured she was always protected, but fear for him every time he left the estate on business that grew more dangerous by the day. The Romano family had responded to their failed assault with escalating acts of sabotage, burned warehouses, compromised business deals, strategic pressure on mutual associates. Salvatore spent 18-hour days managing his organization's response, coming home exhausted and carrying tension in every line of his body. Tonight, she found him in his study at nearly midnight, still wearing his suit from morning meetings but with his tie discarded and sleeves rolled up. Multiple phones lay scattered across his desk, alongside intelligence reports and surveillance photographs. "You should be sleeping," she said softly from the doorway. Salvatore looked up from a document that appeared to detail shipping routes, his expression shifting from business-focused intensity to something warmer at the sight of her. "So should you. Hard to sleep when the person you care about is obviously carrying the weight of the world." She stepped into the room, noting the empty coffee cups and barely touched dinner tray. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" A slight smile tugged at his mouth. "Are you mothering me, Amara Williams?" "Someone needs to." She moved to the chair across from his desk, settling into what had become their unofficial evening ritual. Over the past 2 weeks, these late-night conversations had become precious to both of them, moments when they could exist as simply two people talking instead of a crime boss and his son's caregiver. "How's Tommy handling everything?" Salvatore asked, though she knew he had checked on his son multiple times throughout the day. "Better than you are," she replied honestly. "Children are remarkably resilient when they feel secure in their family's love." The word family still caused something to flicker across Salvatore's features whenever she used it. Hope, maybe, mixed with the kind of careful disbelief of a man who had learned not to expect good things to last. "And how are you handling everything?" he asked, his voice taking on the gentle quality he reserved for their private moments. It was a loaded question. How did she explain that she had fallen completely in love with a man whose world could destroy everything she had ever known? How did she describe the strange peace she felt in this house, despite the danger? The way Tommy's happiness had become as important to her as breathing, the devastating tenderness in Salvatore's eyes when he thought no one was watching. "I'm exactly where I want to be," she said simply. Salvatore leaned back in his chair, studying her with intensity that made her pulse quicken. "Even knowing what my life involves, even after the attack, the constant security, the reality that my enemies will always see you as a target, especially knowing all that." She met his gaze steadily. "Do you want to know what I see when I look at you, Salvatore?" Something vulnerable flickered in his expression. "Tell me." "I see a man who reads bedtime stories to his son every night, no matter how late he comes home. I see someone who learned my coffee preference within a week and makes sure fresh flowers appear in the kitchen because he noticed they make me smile. I see a father who would rather face an army of enemies than disappoint his 8-year-old by missing a school play." She leaned forward, her voice gaining intensity. "Yes, you're dangerous. Yes, you make choices that most people would never have to face. But underneath all that, you're just a man who loves his family and will do whatever it takes to protect them. How could I be afraid of that?" Salvatore went very still, as if her words had struck something fundamental inside him. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. "Amara, I know this isn't a normal life," she continued. "I know there are no guarantees about our safety or our future. But I also know that I've never felt more valued, more protected, more genuinely cared for than I do in this house with you and Tommy." The admission hung between them, changing everything. Salvatore stood slowly, moving around the desk until he stood directly in front of her chair. His dark eyes searched her face as if looking for any sign of uncertainty or fear. "If we do this," he said quietly, "if we become what we both know we're already becoming, there's no going back to a normal life. My world doesn't let go of the people it claims." "I don't want normal," she replied, rising to stand inches away from him. "I want this. I want you. I want the family we're building together." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, years of careful distance dissolving in the space between heartbeats. Then Salvatore cupped her face in his hands with devastating gentleness. "I love you," he said, the words carrying the weight of a man who had never expected to feel such emotion again. "God help us both. I love you completely." "Good," Amara whispered, rising on her toes to meet his mouth as it descended toward hers. "Because I love you too, and I was starting to think you'd never get around to doing something about it." Their first kiss tasted like coffee and promises, like the beginning of something that would reshape both their lives in ways neither could imagine. When they finally broke apart, Salvatore rested his forehead against hers, his breathing unsteady. "Marry me," he said suddenly, the words spilling out before he could stop them. Amara laughed, joy and surprise mixing in the sound. "Are you proposing to me in your study at midnight, while you're running a war against the Romano family?" "I'm proposing to you because I can't imagine facing another day without knowing your mind completely," he replied with serious intensity. "Because if something happens to me, I want to know you and Tommy are legally protected. Because I want the whole world to understand that you're not just Tommy's caregiver. You're my woman, my partner, my family." The raw emotion in his voice stole her breath. This wasn't a romantic proposal, it was a battle cry, a declaration of war against anyone who might try to separate them. "Yes," she said simply, watching his expression transform from vulnerable hope to blazing joy. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent message. Salvatore glanced at it, and his expression immediately shifted back to business mode. "What is it?" Amara asked, recognizing the change. "Francesco Romano wants to meet," he said, his voice taking on the dangerous edge she had learned to recognize. "Tomorrow night, neutral ground. He claims he wants to negotiate an end to hostilities." "That's good news, isn't it?" Salvatore's smile held no warmth. "In our world, when your enemy suddenly wants to talk, it usually means they're planning something that requires you to lower your guard. The engagement ring might have to wait, because first, Salvatore Marchetti had a war to finish." The meeting with Francesco Romano was set for midnight at Calvary Cemetery, neutral ground where both families' dead rested side by side, in eternal ironic peace. Salvatore spent the evening in tactical preparation, working with Vincent and his security team to plan contingencies for every possible scenario. But his mind kept drifting to Amara, who was upstairs helping Tommy with homework as if their world wasn't balanced on the edge of a knife. Her ability to maintain normalcy for his son, even as danger swirled around them, was one of the many reasons he had fallen so completely in love with her. "Boss?" Vincent's voice cut through his distraction. "We need to discuss extraction protocols if this goes sideways." Salvatore forced his attention back to the tactical map spread across his desk. "If Romano tries anything, priority one is getting back here alive. Amara and Tommy are the only things that matter." "Understood." Vincent paused. "For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice." "About the meeting?" "About her, Miss Williams." Vincent's normally stoic expression showed rare emotion. "She's good for you, good for Tommy, good for the family." Before Salvatore could respond, Maria appeared in the doorway with obvious distress. "Mr. Marchetti, there's a problem. Miss Williams received a phone call about her sister." Ice flooded Salvatore's veins. Amara had mentioned her younger sister Sarah only once, describing a college student in Boston who believed Amara worked as a private tutor for wealthy families. It was the only connection to her previous life that remained, the only vulnerability his enemies could exploit. "What kind of call?" he asked, though he already knew the answer would be devastating. "Someone claiming to be from Massachusetts General Hospital," Maria explained. "They said Sarah Williams was in a serious car accident and asking for her sister." The setup was elegant and obvious. Create an emergency compelling enough to draw Amara away from his protection, then use her as leverage against him during the Romano meeting. Francesco had clearly done his research on Salvatore's new weakness. "Where is she now?" Salvatore demanded. "Packing," Maria replied. "She's determined to drive to Boston tonight." Salvatore found Amara in the guest room she had been using, throwing clothes into a suitcase with frantic efficiency. Her usual composure had been shattered by maternal panic, exactly the response Francesco Romano had counted on. "Amara," he said gently. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I have to go, Salvatore. Sarah is only 22. She's alone. She needs me." "It's a trap," he interrupted quietly. The words stopped her cold. "What?" "The phone call, the hospital, the timing. It's designed to separate us before my meeting with Romano tonight." Salvatore moved to her, taking her shaking hands in his steady ones. "I'm sorry, but your sister is being used as bait." Horror and understanding warred across Amara's features. "But what if you're wrong? What if Sarah is really hurt and I don't go because of your suspicious nature?" It was the impossible choice Francesco had designed. Force Amara to choose between protecting herself and potentially saving her sister. Either decision would torture her, and either outcome would give Romano an advantage. "Vincent," Salvatore called, and his captain appeared immediately. "Get me confirmation on Sarah Williams's status. Current location, health, security situation. I want to know everything in 30 minutes. While Vincent made calls, Salvatore gathered Amara into his arms, feeling her trembling with the effort of holding herself together. "If Sarah is in real danger, we'll handle it," he promised. My resources, my protection, whatever she needs. But you don't go anywhere alone tonight. Not with Romano looking for leverage. This is what it means, isn't it? Amara whispered against his chest. Loving someone in your world means everyone you care about becomes a target. The raw pain in her voice hit him like a physical blow. Yes, he said honestly. It means exactly that. 20 minutes later, Vincent returned with news that sent relief flooding through the room. Sarah Williams is safe in her Boston apartment, studying for finals. No accidents, no hospital visits. The phone call was fake. Amara's legs buckled with relief, and Salvatore caught her, holding her steady as she processed how close she had come to walking into Romano's trap. So what happens now? She asked, her voice stronger but still shaky. Now I go to my meeting with Francesco, Salvatore replied, and I make sure he understands that threatening my family was the last mistake he'll ever make. What if it's a trap for you too? Salvatore's smile was sharp as a blade. Then Francesco Romano is about to discover that I've been planning for this war a lot longer than he has. But as he prepared to leave for the cemetery, Salvatore couldn't shake the feeling that Romano's willingness to target innocents meant their conflict was about to escalate beyond anything either family had experienced before. The game was changing, and in his world when the rules shifted, people died. He just had to make sure he wasn't one of them. Calvary Cemetery at midnight was a landscape of shadows and marble monuments, generations of Chicago's dead keeping silent watch over the living who came to settle scores among their graves. Salvatore arrived with Vincent and 2 soldiers, while Francesco Romano emerged from the darkness with his own escort of hardened men. The Romano patriarch had aged poorly over the past year, his once impressive frame now gaunt with the stress of maintaining power in an increasingly competitive landscape. But his eyes still burned with the calculation that had kept his family relevant for 3 decades. Sal, Francesco nodded with false courtesy. Thank you for coming. Francesco. Salvatore's acknowledgement held no warmth. You wanted to talk. Talk. Straight to business, I respect that. Romano gestured toward a weathered bench between 2 family mausoleums. Perhaps we could sit? What I have to propose requires careful consideration. They sat with their respective bodyguards, maintaining defensive positions, 2 predators evaluating each other for weaknesses. In the distance, Chicago's skyline glittered with lights, the city oblivious to the negotiation that would determine the balance of power in its underworld. The conflict between our families has become expensive, Francesco began. 6 weeks of warfare, damaged operations, lost revenue, dead soldiers. Salvatore remained silent, letting Romano make his case. I'm prepared to offer you the North Side territory, Francesco continued. Complete withdrawal from docks, trucking, 3 restaurant fronts. Essentially, I'm giving you what you wanted when this started. The offer was generous, too generous. Salvatore had learned to be suspicious when enemies suddenly became reasonable. In exchange for, he prompted, your new woman. Francesco's mask of civility slipped slightly, revealing the predator beneath. The caregiver. I want her removed from the equation. Cold fury flooded Salvatore's system, though his expression didn't change. Explain. She represents a vulnerability you've never had before, Romano continued conversationally. Before her you were predictable, ruthless. Your decisions were based on strategy, not emotion. Now you're making choices to protect someone who isn't even family. She is family, Salvatore said quietly, the words carrying lethal weight. Francesco laughed, the sound echoing off stone monuments. A housekeeper you've known for 2 months. Come on, Sal. This isn't love, it's midlife desperation. You're trying to replace your dead wife with the first woman who showed interest in your son. The insult to Amara's character and his own judgment sent violence surging through Salvatore's veins. Vincent shifted slightly, reading his boss's body language and preparing for conflict. You have 10 seconds to withdraw that statement, Salvatore said, his voice dropping to the register that preceded bloodshed. Or what? Francesco stood, revealing the pistol he had been concealing. You'll start a war. Oh wait, we're already in one. The difference is I'm offering you a way out that preserves your empire and eliminates your weakness. Around them, both sets of bodyguards drew weapons in a choreographed dance of threatened violence, but neither boss moved, locked in a stalemate that would determine far more than territorial boundaries. The woman disappears, Francesco continued, permanently. In return, you get the North Side and we return to profitable coexistence. Refuse, and I'll make sure she understands exactly what kind of man she's chosen to love. The threat was clear. If Salvatore didn't sacrifice Amara, Romano would target her directly, using whatever methods necessary to break their relationship and restore Salvatore's focus to business. You know, Salvatore said conversationally, you've made an interesting assumption about my priorities. Which assumption is that? That I value territory more than the people I love. Salvatore smiled, and Francesco took an involuntary step backward. That offer you just made, it tells me everything I need to know about why you're losing this war. I'm not losing anything. You are, Salvatore interrupted. You're losing because you still think this is about business, about territory and revenue and traditional power structures. You don't understand that everything changed the moment you targeted my family. Vincent and the other soldiers tensed, recognizing the shift in their boss's demeanor. When Salvatore spoke in that particular tone, violence usually followed within minutes. This war isn't ending with negotiations, Francesco. It's ending with your complete removal from Chicago. Tonight. Romano raised his pistol, but he was already too late. Salvatore's movement was lightning fast, honed by 20 years of survival, in a profession that rewarded quick reflexes. The gun flew from Francesco's grip as Salvatore's men advanced on Romano's bodyguards with tactical precision. Within 30 seconds, Francesco Romano found himself disarmed and surrounded, his men neutralized but alive, a professional courtesy that wouldn't extend much longer. You made this personal when you threatened Amara, Salvatore said, retrieving Francesco's fallen weapon. But here's what you failed to understand. I don't negotiate with people who threaten my family. I eliminate them. You kill me, and every family in Chicago will unite against you, Francesco gasped. No, Salvatore corrected. They'll respect the fact that I protect what's mine. In our world, that kind of loyalty commands respect, not fear. The single gunshot echoed through the cemetery like thunder, sending roosting birds exploding from nearby trees. Francesco Romano's body crumpled among the graves of his predecessors, joining Chicago's lengthy roster of men who had underestimated the price of threatening a machete. As Vincent's team handled cleanup with practiced efficiency, Salvatore stood among the monuments and made a decision that would reshape his empire's future. The old ways, territory wars, negotiated truces, business-focused violence, were ending tonight. From now on, his organization would operate with a single, uncompromising principle. Family came first, empire second. It was time to go home to the people who made everything else worth protecting. Dawn was breaking over Chicago as Salvatore's car approached the estate, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that promised a new beginning. In the passenger seat, he turned his phone over in his hands, finally working up the courage to call Amara and tell her that their war was over. But when he opened the front door, he found her waiting in the foyer with Tommy, both of them fully dressed, despite the early hour. You felt it too, she said simply. Salvatore nodded, understanding flowing between them without need for explanation. Some connections ran deeper than rational thought. She had known the moment Francesco Romano died, felt the shift in the universe that meant their family was finally safe. It's over, Tommy asked, his 8-year-old intuition picking up on the change in atmosphere. It's over, Salvatore confirmed, gathering his son into his arms. The bad people won't bother us anymore. Good. Tommy squeezed his father's neck with fierce contentment. Now, we can have normal days again. Normal days. The phrase sent warmth spreading through Salvatore's chest as he looked at Amara over his son's shoulder. They could build normal days now. Family dinners without security concerns, school events without tactical planning, quiet evenings that weren't interrupted by crisis management. There's something I need to tell both of you, Salvatore said, setting Tommy down and taking Amara's hand. Something I've been planning for a while, but couldn't do while we were at war. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small velvet box, dropping to one knee in the foyer where they had first become a family. Tommy's eyes widened with delight as understanding dawned. Amara Williams, Salvatore said, his voice rough with emotion. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife and Tommy's mom officially? Will you help me build a life that's worthy of the love you've brought into our house? Tears streamed down Amara's face as she looked at the ring, a perfect sapphire surrounded by diamonds, elegant and timeless rather than ostentatious. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, of course, yes. Tommy cheered and launched himself at both of them, creating a tangle of arms and laughter in the morning light streaming through the windows. As Salvatore slipped the ring onto Amara's finger, he felt something he hadn't experienced since Sophia's death. Perfect, uncomplicated happiness. "When?" Tommy demanded. "When's the wedding? Can I be the best man? Can we have cake?" "Soon," Salvatore promised, pulling both of them closer. "As soon as we can plan something beautiful enough to deserve your new mum." 6 months later, they stood in the gardens of the estate under an archway of white roses, surrounded by family and friends who had learned to accept Amara as Salvatore's partner in every sense. Vincent served as best man, while Tommy carried the rings with solemn importance, his role as the catalyst for their love story finally complete. But the most important moment came after the ceremony, when Salvatore found Amara alone on the terrace overlooking Chicago's skyline. "Any regrets?" he asked, the same question he had posed the night they first kissed. "Only one," she replied, turning in his arms to face him. Panic flickered across his features. "What?" Amara smiled, the expression radiant with joy and mischief. "I regret waiting so long to tell you what I knew the first day I walked into this house." "Which was?" "That Tommy chose correctly," she said simply. "When he pointed at me and said he wanted me to be his mom, he was choosing the person who was already completely in love with both of you. He just saw it before we did." Salvatore threw back his head and laughed, the sound carrying across the gardens, where their wedding guests celebrated the unlikely love story that had transformed a crime boss's fortress into a true family home. "In that case," he said, spinning her around as the sun set over their city, "I guess we owe everything to an 8-year-old boy who had better judgment than either of his parents." "The best decisions always come from the heart," Amara replied, kissing the man who had taught her that love could bloom even in the shadows, that family could be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most dangerous men were capable of the greatest tenderness. Below them, Chicago stretched into the night, but for the first time in years, Salvatore Marchetti wasn't watching for threats or planning strategies. He was simply holding the woman he loved and thinking about the normal, beautiful life they were going to build together. The empire would endure, the business would continue. But from now on, everything served the same purpose: protecting the family that had chosen each other across every barrier of race, class, and circumstance. Because sometimes, when an 8-year-old boy points at a housekeeper and declares her worthy of love, he's really pointing toward a future none of them could have imagined, but all of them were brave enough to build together. And in a world where power was usually built on fear and violence, the Marchetti family had discovered something far more valuable: a love strong enough to transform everything it touched, including the dangerous man who had learned to put family before empire, heart before strategy, and forever before everything else that had once seemed important. The story that began with a child's innocent choice had become a love that would last lifetimes.